Hey there, it's Michael Osinski.
And it's also Tyler Esselman.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11 is our podcast where we invite someone each week to make their case for what they believe is a perfect album.
So perfect that a 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough.
9. Not good enough.
9. That's a different number, Tyler. That's number below 10.
Oh, you're killing me with that one. I didn't. That's bad. That's bad. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you.
Yes. Happy Saturday night.
Dear listeners, this season we are recording things well in advance of when you are hearing them. Just a heads up, but a little sneak peek. While we are recording this on a Saturday night, our guest is recording this on a Sunday morning.
Crazy.
So that gives you a little clue as to where the guest might be. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know if you're doing your math really, really quick.
Hey, Tyler, who is our guest this week?
We are talking to Joe Rivers. Joe Rivers, raconteur, bon viveur, Renaissance man. Joe is none of these, and less. When not in an office, he writes about music, a hobby which started as a way to get free CDs, which has morphed into 15 years at independent music and film website noripcord.com, plus articles in The Guardian, Clash Magazine, and the NME, among others. He's also had more than one diss track written about him. Originally from the UK, he now lives in Sydney, Australia, with his wife Claire and their dog Mabel. Joe Rivers, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
We keep getting more and more international, further and further afield. It's fun, exciting for us.
Can you go any further? Do you know anyone in, I don't know, Wellington?
I think so.
Now what challenge accepted, Joe.
Yeah, challenge. We're going to work on that.
Or someone in Antarctica. We should record someone in Antarctica.
They would down there at the research station.
Yeah, before it melts away. So sorry, too soon. Too soon. Sorry,
that's
y'all.
heavy already. Yeah,
Clock's ticking. Well, we're also very excited to have you on as somebody who you should consider yourself well a part of the music media landscape, and it's always fun for us to kind of pick the brains of people who do this as a habit. Do this as a profession in some way, have the compulsion to do that. So
I think habit and compulsion are definitely more appropriate words than anything else. But yes, totally. I'll do what I can.
Well, we're really excited about this album that you brought because it's crazy, kind of exciting and relevant for this summer that we've been having. So Joe, could you tell us what album hath thou brought before the This One Goes to 11 tribunal today?
I hath brought broth. Sounding like Daffy Duck. I hath brought Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides by SOPHIE.
This is Michael. Were you familiar with SOPHIE before Joe nominated this album?
Familiar with SOPHIE, but could not have picked out a song if you had played one for me and said, "Guess who this is?" I wouldn't have been able to immediately determine that. Now I think I do have a good sense of what her sound was. At least I think I do, but this album kind of goes all over the place. And then also with her posthumous album that by the time this episode comes out, the album will have been released. I've listened to a few tracks off that and I'm kind of like, I don't know how to pin her down. So I'm like really fascinated to have this conversation today.
Exciting. You talk about trailblazers. You've done some writing online about SOPHIE that everyone should check out, and we'll certainly link to that. But there seems to be a lot of SOPHIE's reverberations that are being felt. But for those of you who may not know SOPHIE, we have a convenient feature that will help get you up to speed. Michael, what's that feature called?
It's called The Beginner's Guide to SOPHIE's Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides in 60 seconds.
You're doing it today, aren't you?
I sure am. Some of our album titles this season they're a tongue twister.
Yeah, it makes it more difficult for you because you've got to fit that album title in the 60 seconds, right? So
exactly.
58 seconds straight away.
Joe, you'll get to do an assessment of Michael's job at summing up SOPHIE and the album's context, and then you'll be able to build your case. Sound good?
Okay.
All right, Michael. We've got 60 seconds on the clock.
Okay.
Starting in 3, 2, 1.
There would be no Brat and no Billy without Sophie. Born in Glasgow in 1986, she took an early liking to electronic music, attending raves with her father before even starting secondary school. Beyond that, we don't know much, as she did not make a lot of public appearances. Her breakout came with the singles Bip in 2013 and Lemonade in 2015. No, not that Lemonade, which played in a McDonald's commercial. Her experimental electronic sound made her one of the progenitors of a new genre, hyperpop, and led to her partnership with Charlie XCX. In 2017, she released a single and music video, It's Okay to Cry, featuring her voice and image for the first time and prompting her to disclose her trans identity, which silenced some of her critics. We're looking at you, Grimes. The single would find its way onto her 2018 album, Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides, a mondegreen for I Love Every Person's Insides, an album so good it prompted journalist Joe Rivers to call it, quote, as affecting as it is thrilling. Sadly, Sophie died after falling from a 3-story building in Athens in 2021. But her music lives on in the tracks she produced for artists like Vince Staples and Kim Petras, and in her posthumous self-titled album released earlier this year.
Wow.
Right.
I feel that was absolutely shameless by quoting me in there, which to be honest works completely. I'm all for that. Yeah, I'll give you. Am I allowed to say that goes to 11?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Yes, Joe. Okay, I will. And I did not know the thing about the mondegreen as well.
I didn't either. Yeah. I had missed that.
I didn't know what the word mondegreen meant until I did the research for this, and then I was like, "Oh wow, I learned a new word now."
Excellent.
Everyone wins.
Maybe we take this moment before we transition to Joe himself, to talk about the gender, the pronouns as they apply to Sophie and their legacy. It sounds like Sophie didn't really identify with any sort of gendered pronoun structure. Joe, do you want to speak a little bit more to that and kind of how you understand it?
Yeah, so my understanding is that Sophie preferred, if anything, to be referred to as Sophie wherever possible, rather than she, her, or they, them, or anything along those sorts of lines. But I think, whilst actually I've written a piece in the past, the one you mentioned earlier, which does refer to Sophie as Sophie throughout, but already that kind of comes across as a little bit more clumsy in conversation. So sure. I think it's probably okay to refer or switch between Sophie and she, her. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be okay. I think it's important to refer to people as they wish to be referred to, but I think in this case, I think we're on safe ground with she, her as probably as a default, I think.
We can consider that our disclaimer towards respecting the beliefs that she was working with before her passing.
But also, before we dive too much into the artist and the album, Joe, we got to get to know you a little bit more, because like we've known you for what, like 20 minutes now on the Zoom call.
At least. We go way back,
including technical difficulties. Yeah,
we go way back to the previous month. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what your relationship with music is, past, present, writ large, as Tyler likes to say?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this, obviously, and it comes at quite an opposite time for reasons which will become clear towards the end of what I'm about to say. So I think music, like a lot of people, has always been a very, very large part of my life, to the extent that my parents just had music playing, had the radio on, just always when I was a kid. They still do, actually. They still live in the UK. I call them every week, and every time at some point during the conversation, someone has to say, can you turn the radio off? Because they've still got the radio playing while we're talking. But some of my earliest childhood memories are around that. And some things I don't even remember are related to music. So my parents have told me before that when I was about 2, I was convinced that our postman was Phil Collins, which I have no recollection of whatsoever. But apparently that's a thing that I did. I once met, the first time I ever met Americans, again, when I was around 2. Apparently I was convinced they were Womack and Womack. Again, I mean, my parents could be lying to me. I have no recollection of this whatsoever.
It's so specific. It's so absurdly specific.
Yeah. I think I was the 2-year-old telling them I preferred their earlier work, I think.
God.
But yeah. But then became quite obsessed with the radio, with charts. I'm kind of a bit of a maths and stats nerd as well. So like the fact of I have a maths degree as well. I studied at university. So the kind of mixture of numbers and music, if you like, worked for me from a very young age. Was very obsessed with Top of the Pops, which is a show which I'm sure you'll have heard of, but was a kind of UK staple from the 60s up until about 10 years ago, I think. Now, when I was around 10, I was kind of the perfect age to be completely captivated by the Spice Girls. So they were a huge deal for me, both from a music point of view, but from a kind of wanted to be friends with them. And I also wanted to be in the band, and I kind of wanted to kiss some of them, but that I didn't quite understand that as well. It's a confusing time.
Sure.
I was the complete correct age to be able to say that the Strokes completely changed my life. I'm the correct age to say that, and it would be an enormous lie to say that, because full disclosure, I'm not the first member of my family that you've had on this show.
This is true.
Yes.
So,
we should put it all out in the open for full transparency. We're all about transparency here.
Nepotism is a real problem within the podcast industry.
It is.
We need to
Sadly.
We need to address it now, but maybe after this episode. But in a previous series, you spoke to Matt Risby about Blue Lines by Massive Attack, and he is my cousin. Well, he mentioned me in the episode. This is kind of how this all came about.
You're damn right. You're damn right.
He mentioned about the town that he grew up in being, I think he used the phrase cultural black hole.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was Ipswich, right?
It's a town called Ipswich. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He left at 18 and basically never came back, which is what I did as well. But so we both went to university in different parts of the UK and just kind of never went back home effectively. But in saying, the reason I bring that up is because I say, the Strokes should have changed my life, but what was this, 2001 we're talking about? But instead I didn't know anyone who liked the Strokes. We knew who they were, but they were a bit too cool, a bit too trendy for their own good. Where all my friends and I, the Strokes were good, we thought, but they were no Limp Bizkit, I think, was the kind of the general consensus among my friendship group. So which is problematic for many reasons. So new metal holds a place in my heart a lot more than it should, I think.
We don't believe in guilty pleasures, though.
No,
all pleasures are just pleasures, as far as I'm concerned.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Break Stuff is a great song. I want to put that out there.
Incredible
exactly,
song.
Yeah. And again, the thing with Ipswich, it's a fairly quiet town. I didn't even grow up in the town. I grew up in the countryside. So a 15-year-old living a very middle class upbringing in the countryside with absolutely no problems, no responsibilities. Break Stuff really, really spoke to me.
Totally.
It's that kind of, I think from there kind of moved on to, actually went quite far the other way in terms of really got into bands like The Smiths and Belle and Sebastian, and did that thing which teenagers want to do, where made that my personality in lieu of an actual personality. And
welcome to group.
Yeah. No, this is a safe space. Yeah. And took myself far, far too seriously. Went to university, started writing about music, as you mentioned, just as a way to get free CDs, which for the younger listeners were kind of shiny circular discs.
Yeah. Type CD into Google image search, kids, and maybe you'll see. But actually, we say that, but tapes are coming back.
Yeah. CDs, I know.
This is the whole thing. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I actually own 0 CDs now. I do not have one in the house because they're all in my parents' loft.
There you go.
It's quite difficult to emigrate with hundreds of CDs.
Oh, got it.
Started writing about music, and again, did a very kind of take myself too seriously sort of thing, and was play acting at music criticism. So sort of learnt the language and would say things like this sophomore album is a cathedral of sound, the kind of stuff that doesn't actually mean anything that people say.
Sophomore, anytime you can use the term sophomore, though, like it's great. The sophomore album is a staple of music journalism. Yeah, exactly.
And as a British person, I do not know what sophomore means other than second, purely in relation to music. It's second albums. I don't know junior, senior, sophomore. I don't even know what they
mean. Freshman. That's the only one.
Thank you. That's
the one you're missing.
There we go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know what. Well, I'm assuming junior comes before senior. Anyway, so and then go to around, where are we now? I'd say 12 years ago, which is probably when sort of poptimism started getting talked about a little bit more. People talk about poptimism. I like to say that I had a popiphany. Around 12 years ago. So that's around things like Bad Romance, Call Me Maybe, I guess that's when Beyonce got really, really huge. Robin, so I know you featured Body Talk on here.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I might not be quite right with the years exactly here, but this is this kind of time. There was a UK artist who I don't know if you'd know, called KTB, who had a few hits and was kind of more in that sort of slightly UK garage grime, but with mixed with pop kind of thing. And she really, really liked her. I was still doing the writing lots about music and being, very, very serious and chin strokey. And sorry, you can't hear this in an audio medium, but I do have a beard, so lots of chin stroking.
Totally.
But also very much liking and enjoying music that is not generally towards white men with beards, I guess is the I mean, again, people can't see me, but I feel like I should be, coming on here to talk about The National or something like that. But so there's real kind of like polar things, and I was listening more to quote unquote serious music in terms of shows, attending more pop friendly things. I feel like, and just in terms of like a place where I felt happier and safer and more accepted, that was kind of around those. The reason I mentioned about this being a good time to talk about this, I came to realize very, very recently that I can do the music criticism thing where I'm talking about I can write an album review that looks like album reviews look like, in the 21st century, the online album review. I can do that. I can really like pop music, dance music that kind of makes you move, kind of speaks to you on a more primal level. And I haven't mentioned soul and disco, which is actually probably the two things I listen to the most, to be completely honest.
No kidding.
But then
That's
there's
great.
this part in the middle, which is music that means something to you and music that speaks to you. And I kind of feel like I've been at either end of that, at both ends of the spectrum, if you like, in terms of that, but not in this kind of middle. Actually, this music is important to me, and being prepared to, make yourself a bit more vulnerable and say, actually, this song really speaks to me. This is kind of a part of me, and this is something that really, really matters to me, because that's a difficult thing to do, because I know, you guys aren't going to say anything bad about that, because that would make you terrible podcast hosts if you started, denigrating my taste. But in the big scary wide world out there, if you say to someone, actually, this song speaks to me, this is really important to me, and they're dismissive of that, that's quite a difficult thing to deal with, I think. The reason I bring this up is because, and am I allowed to plug things here?
Yes, of course.
You're damn right. Yeah.
Okay. So all the kids these days, they're into Substack, aren't they? That's the hot new
Oh yes,
social
Joe.
media thing. Yeah.
Go off, King.
No one's ever said that to me before. I think it's because I mostly speak to British and Australian people, and it doesn't work with those accents.
It's true.
I have just started a Substack, which is kind of telling the story of my life, if you like, which is, it's a very regular life. There's no, grand revelations, but it is the story of my life, but as told in chronological order through UK #1 singles.
Ooh.
So not every single one, because
Sure.
I don't have anything to say about all of them, and I've only just started it, so I'm also notoriously bad for following through with projects. So there's every chance by the time, by the time that, well, this is good motivation to continue this, because
totally.
Otherwise there's every chance by the time this episode goes live, people will go and look and it's like, hang on, he only posted 3 things and nothing for 2 months. At the moment,
I think there's a better chance that Oasis will cancel the reunion tour than doing by the time this episode comes out.
You are playing with fire.
Like, I said it.
Yeah. What other terrible predictions can we make here? For anyone know, we're recording this in February 2005. So
I
that's
love
made
that
me sort
idea.
of re-examine that relationship with music, and to be like, you know what? This stuff is important to me. And so even some of the things I've said about the Postman being Phil Collins and sort of falling in love with Top of the Pops and that kind of thing, that's that sort of mentioning. So I'm going chronological order. I reached the age of 5. It's really, it's very therapeutic, actually.
Yeah.
I was going to say in a nutshell, but what's the opposite of a nutshell? In a thesis.
That
is my
dissertation.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting project, and like a worthy kind of like way of stepping through your life, especially kind of considering all of the writing that you have out there.
I've been doing that for sort of 15 years. And there's some years I've been very prolific and some years I haven't. But if I had to guess, I'm sure I've written, the number of words I've written about music that are published out there somewhere is in six figures, really.
Nice.
And the idea of album reviews is they're not supposed to be about the writer. Quite often, if I am reading an album review and I see that the writer has gone first person, that kind of gives me the ick. I think that's what the kids say.
Yeah, that's what the kids say.
Yeah. Again, for anyone who can't see, I'm 21 years old, obviously. But
yeah. Hello, fellow. What is it?
How do you do?
How do you do, fellow
kids?
Teens? Unless you're Robert Christgau, and then like everything's about him. So
yeah. It sort of raises the question, though. I mean, the albums that there's too much music being created out there for us all to consume, and is the reason that we listen to certain artists or certain albums because those artists just are doing something that speaks to more people or that's quote unquote better? Or is it because they've got the machines behind them to really promote them? Like, this is something that I'm asking myself more. Like, a lot of the artists we cover on this podcast are, mainstream or mainstream adjacent or like popular indie. But there are probably plenty of even pop artists out there that aren't getting the same sort of acclaim that, someone like, Beyonce or Taylor Swift is. Like, I mean, I don't expect us to answer that question right now, but I just sort of wonder sometimes, like, what is the reason why some music sticks for more people and some doesn't?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the machinations of the industry and how promotion works to kind of know exactly how you get people's ears in front of it. Is that the word? I don't know.
Yeah. Get those ears over here.
Yeah. It's a bit of a clumsy metaphor, but yeah, I don't really know enough about that, but I do wonder if people are starting to get a little bit overwhelmed by the choice. And you said, hey, CDs are coming back, tapes are coming back. And I think people quite like being told what to do and what to like. I think and I don't know if this is just a millennial thing, but I sometimes miss the monoculture a little bit. I sometimes think that
every day.
So there's a really, really fantastic book about the history of pop music called Yeah, and it's by a guy called Bob Stanley, who's in the band Saint Etienne. Don't know if you're familiar with Saint Etienne.
I've heard of them, but I've not listened to them. And
he has written it was about 10 years ago this book came out, I think, and it's the history of pop music. It's really, really detailed. It's really brilliant. It really kind of captures the sort of fan energy and things behind stuff. But even though it came out 10 years ago, it basically stops at the millennium. And the reason is because he said, well, that's when that's Napster, that's streaming, that's subcultures and tribes and this kind of thing sort of died out a little bit. I think there's a real risk of me just sounding my age here. I kind of feel like the last sort of musical subculture might have been like emo.
I don't hate that take. I think that's a well-founded take.
It's now stan culture. So it's the music Swifties and it's what Charlie XCX is Angels.
Is that what they're called? Okay.
I think so. Charlie's Angels. I think.
That's really that's clever. That's clever. I like that.
And the Beehive.
Beehive.
And it becomes...
Lana kind of has her own. They may not have a name, but I think she has a pretty thriving stan culture.
And that's become tribal to the extent of not like I'm into emo, so I like My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy, and my identity is this group of bands. It's my identity is this one artist,
right?
And people support them like they do sports teams, really.
I totally agree with what you're talking about how that is sort of the stan culture has sort of replaced that kind of maybe more capacious idea of a subculture that includes a variety of artists that might have similar values or similar musical qualities, that we've kind of zeroed in on artists in that way nowadays. But what's interesting is that Sophie seems to be kind of like, for lack of a better term, disruptor, or, like a little bit it seemed to have been a disruptive force, or at least was making a comment on that. So is that part of your understanding of Sophie, or like where do you see Sophie in the landscape of all of that era of pop music?
So I think you mentioned in the intro, what do you call it? The 60-second guide to Oil of Every Pearl's Undersides by Sophie. Great title for that feature, by the way. I wanted to make a joke about it. Is the feature always called that? Because otherwise, this must be the first episode where there's ever been apropos.
It worked out well this week. Yeah,
thank God, finally someone nominated it.
That's true.
But you said BIP was 2013, I think. And
I think so, yeah.
In talking about my own personal sort of pop epiphany, if you like, I think it's that's kind of slightly before then, so early 2010s. I think we're talking here. Yeah, that just came from being a little bit bored of just music that wasn't for dancing to. Really, I think it's just something a bit more upbeat, a bit more freeing. I think, and so I first became aware of Sophie a little bit after that. So I remember reading about PC music. So that's the kind of collective of artists who, I guess for want of a better term, I'm kind of rewriting music history a bit here, but I think we can sort of safely say they invented hyperpop, basically.
It would seem so, yes.
Yes, and which is sort of pop music with, well, everything turned to 11. It's kind of maximalism, day glow, kind of almost to the point of being sort of novelty trance type music in some aspects. Sophie, I don't think was ever officially part of PC music, but kind of was in around the scene, if you like. I heard of her, but became aware of her with the songs Lemonade, which you mentioned, and a song called Hard, which I think came out at the same time. And it was just unlike anything I'd ever heard. It's so bizarre. And the word I keep coming back to with Sophie's music is it's tactile. The sounds in it are just something that just don't exist in other pop music. It's so kind of filtered and treated and had all sorts of stuff that I don't understand done to it, but there's almost like a sort of a plasticity to it sometimes. It's when you're a bit younger and someone hears what listening to and says, well, this isn't music. I feel like you almost could say with Sophie that it isn't music. Sometimes it's like sort of sound experiments, and those sort of songs really, really, sort of blew my mind. And then I actually saw her perform at a festival not long after that. I didn't go explicitly to see her, and it was a DJ set, and this is before she'd kind of made public appearances in her videos. No one really knew what she looked like, and so she DJ'd, but she kept changing the tempos of her songs. If people started dancing, she'd slow it down. It was almost like an anti-performance.
Wow.
In the background, 90% of the time was just her logo of her name kind of flashing up, but then about 10% of the time it would be just cut with stock footage of just completely unrelated things. Sometimes footage of surgery would just show on this enormous screen. It was just the most kind of outsider art, but like a big sort of almost like a fuck you to the audience at the same time as they were enjoying it. Not long after that was when she collaborated with Charlie XCX and did the Vroom Vroom EP.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that it took the world a while to catch up to. Famously, well, I don't know how famously in my circles, in the wider context of the world, it's obviously fairly minor things, but Pitchfork gave a very scathing review to this EP, to the extent that they went back and effectively apologized a few years later and said they'd got it wrong and this was the direction that pop was going in and they should have recognized it and they didn't.
Yeah, they've made a few mistakes over the years.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's not unique to them. But,
we haven't on this podcast though. By the way,
no.
So far we're batting 1,000.
It's an unimpeachable pantheon. Yeah, and I think similarly, this album talking about Oil of Every Pearl's Undersides, Sophie is a bit more well known then, so that wasn't. I think that it was critically acclaimed, but in terms of what it means to the sound of pop, and again, come back to Charlie XCX. We've all had our brat summer, haven't we? I think that's done now. disappointingly for me, it wasn't actually summer when it was Brat Summer.
Yeah, it was a Brat winter for you.
It was a Brat winter. Yeah. Yeah. Although a lot of Brat Summer appeared to be involving going out braless, which is something I generally practice anyway. So I think
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I embrace that.
Yeah. But I think it's been about 5 years since from Oil of Every Pearls and Insides to Brat, and I feel like Brat is kind of this album kind of getting its dues almost. And Charlie XCX has been very clear on that. She references Sophie at least a couple of times on the album by name.
Yeah, at least two songs. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a slower track on Brat called So I, which is entirely about Sophie because they were close friends. So yeah, I feel like Sophie was always about 5 years ahead of the curve, really.
How fun is that? That must have been amazing.
It's a good way of describing it too, because I mean, I sort of think we've been Tyler and I have been sort of discussing like what hyperpop even is, because I think I mean we've a couple times we've referenced 100 Gex on the show, which I just do not understand. And I also wonder, like, does that umbrella include Billie Eilish a little bit? And obviously Charlie XCX. I guess I sort of wonder what the spectrum is of hyperpop, because if it's from like someone like Billie Eilish to 100 Gex, I feel like Charlie XCX sits somewhere in the middle of them. Yeah. And like the most palatable kind. I mean, yeah, for me anyway, like the most palatable version of hyperpop.
Yeah, I think Charlie XCX is very good at drawing things from elsewhere and kind of filtering them through the sort of pop lens, if you like, to make radio friendly hits, I guess, if you like. 100 Gex, I think, Michael, I'm with you there. I think they make me feel very old, 100 Gex. I feel like even though I like hyperpop, I sort of feel like it's a joke that I'm not in on.
Like some moments I feel like I'm too old, I don't get this. Other moments I sort of had a similar experience as a few songs on this Sophie album where I'm just sort of I feel a little bit like orally assaulted, like at some point, just because of like the sort of instrumentation that's used. I mean, you were talking about how Sophie's music sort of sounds. I mean, I guess it's really hard to describe. The thing that comes to my mind is it's like bubbles and scrap metal, because there are moments of it that sound really soft, but at the same time, suddenly there's like a giant knife comes down in the middle of it, and you hear like metal clashing, and like things warp in weird ways. It's just, it does not sound like any other electronic music that I have ever heard.
Yes, yeah. It's bubbles popping and metal, and it sounds like some of the songs sound like they're played on radiators, and very what you were saying about how these sounds don't really feel like they exist in nature. It seems like it's kind of the point, if there's a statement that's being made, if there's a statement that's being made, or an implicit one about what pop is, this idea of her kind of manipulating, and I use manipulating kind of in the most neutral way possible here, manipulating the live audience to not dance. That actually tracks a little bit with the experience of listening to it just on my own, because it's like, what am I being asked of here? I guess in a way that Charlie XCX isn't asking. I'm interested. I found that interesting in the preparation and listening to this album. And also, when you were doing your research, did you come across the track "Hey Cutie"? Did you come across that at all? So
the one with the energy drink, right?
Yes, yeah. So Sophie and I now can't remember who it was. It might have been AJ Cook, who's like the PC music.
Yeah, he's
leader.
The other person.
It was
people sort of credit him and Sophie as being sort of the
Hayden Dunham and AG Cook. Yes, it was those two.
Okay. But I think Hayden Dunham is the model, the front person,
designed the product. Yeah,
and and product. Yeah, so they it was like a Sophie project that was one track called Hey Cutie, and it was a song for a fictitious energy drink. And that's it. And it's a comment about consumerism. And when I saw Sophie, Hayden Dunham came on stage and they played Hey Cutie. It was like, and now we go for a word from our sponsors. It was kind of that kind of thing. Talking about what Sophie is doing and that kind of, assault on the ears, if you like, in a positive way. What particularly interesting and what speaks to me, I think, about this album is that everything that had come before then was individual songs which, push the envelope of what pop is, of what sounds can do. Lots of collaboration. So I've mentioned Charlie XCX, but she collaborated with Madonna before then as well. So Madonna has a history of knowing who the next person to collaborate with, the next sound.
True.
Although, did you listen to the Madonna and Sophie track? Because that is
Bitch, I'm Madonna, right? That's the track. Yeah, I didn't listen to it, but
in my opinion anyway, that's a real kind of. Do you have the phrase "cut and shut" to relate to cars in America, where
No.
you pick up a second-hand car, but it's actually the front half of one car and the second half of another that have been welded together.
Oh wow!
And it's really kind of that really feels like two completely separate tracks they've tried to stick together. It's
okay, interesting. Okay, gotta listen to that.
But there's a few sort of Sophie collaborations, but then this album, despite what you would expect, having listened to Sophie up to that point, actually is a cohesive whole. It is an album. It has ebbs and flows. It's personal. The first track is called "It's Okay to Cry." Sophie sings for the first time on that, which I think at the time was the first time she'd ever used her voice on record.
Yeah.
She appeared in the video. That was the first time she'd ever done something like that. It's a very, very vulnerable song. And then also, even though you have got these things that sound like someone's welding something inside your head, there's also slower, more tender song. So it works as an album from an artist who you would probably least expect them to make something which works as an album in the traditional sense, I'd say.
Well, we've been talking about this for a while now, Joe. We should let the people listen. We should let them hear a little bit of this in greater details. So what's your standout track from this album?
The track that I have chosen is Immaterial.
All right. Well, then why don't we give it a little listen, and we'll say a few more things on the other side.